Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Emily Summers, and I handle all the educational programs at EntertainmentCareers.Net. Our goal is to educate you as job and internship seekers to make better decisions about your careers. And so we are going to be speaking with a lot of industry experts coming up. And if there's a subject or a topic that you'd like for us to cover, please reach out. So today, we're going to be talking to Elke, who is the owner-operator of Stateside Careers, in addition to being the head of global recruitment at Pearl Law Group and an actor. And we frequently get questions from international students and applicants about how to get a job in the US. And this is something that Elke is an expert on. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So just to give everyone a little bit of background before we delve in, obviously you have a lot of different titles. So if you could give us, a succinct a synopsis of what you do, about your service, and how you came to start your business.
Sure. So I came into the industry about 23 years ago, into the entertainment industry as an actor, and at the time was told it was not possible to have a second career unless I wanted to be in hospitality only, which I personally didn't want to pursue. I didn't feel that was correct, so I pursued a career. I sort of fell into a career in recruitment and HR in Australia, and I was able to manage the two careers, acting and working in HR, for a very long time, and I have always been doing the two things. And I then went on my own visa journey coming to the US about 9.5 years ago on an O1 visa, and through that process, I started to learn that there were a lot of US immigration attorneys out there. There were good ones. There were those that were not necessarily so good. And there were some that were brilliant. I went through my own trials and tribulations. And through that process, I learned as much as I could about US immigration to try and educate myself. And then came to realize during that time that there was a real gap between clients and attorneys, and especially artists not really understanding what attorneys are talking about, because you don't go through a visa process until you go through a visa process. And I just started naturally filling in gaps for a lot of people coming to the US by the time I had my O1 and then my green card. Working at a law firm, I started just answering questions for a lot of people, learning a lot about the legal process myself. And it came to be that people that I was helping over the years at different law firms started saying, why is this not your company? And I thought, I don't really know. So I should just make this official and start one. So I'm a go-between between corporates and artists who are wanting to come to the US and the attorney. So I'm like a visa coordinator. And also I have the other arm of Stateside Careers, which is going into companies in America and helping them to fix up their recruitment processes and re-engineer them. So there's a focus on compassion and empathy and kindness, which funnily enough gets a great result and a better result for companies and saves a lot of money. And for the last 3.5 years, I've been fortunate enough, whilst being an actor, to be working for Pearl Law Group, which is a corporate immigration law firm with its headquarters in San Francisco. And in that job, I do all of their global recruitment. So I manage the recruitment function and I operationally do a lot of the recruitment myself. So I kind of wear a couple of different hats, but funnily enough, they all tie into each other and support each other as well, which is really great.
So we get a lot of questions from international applicants looking for work in the US, either as job seekers or as international students looking for internships. And I know that those are two very different things. So maybe to start with, what is your advice to international students who are looking for US internships? And can you walk us through that process? You know, the major hurdles that they will encounter, whether they're going to school, another thing to mention, already in the US, like an international student who is enrolled in a program here versus a student who is, coming straight here from their program abroad.
Sure. A lot of the advice does overlap between job seekers and people from overseas seeking an internship. And that is in that something that I encounter is that doing your research is so critical. I, as a recruiter, see that people spam companies with their applications and their expressions of interest to do an internship. What you see is people that are not at all targeted or selective in their choices. So they're just going, look, I probably have to send out 200 of these to get one person to reply. And yes, it's a numbers game to an extent, but that doesn't mean that you just throw enough mud at the wall and you hope that it sticks. Every single time you reach out to a company, you should have researched that company. You should know the name of the person that you're addressing that letter to about an internship. If you can't show that you've done your research and then you have drafted something that is easy to read and it communicates what you're looking for and why, then my assumption at the other end is you don't know what you want. And I've got too many resumes to go through. I don't have time to check if you really know what you want. I only have time to go to the person who has shown me that they know what they want. So research is enormous. The other thing is that if you don't know your working rights coming over, whether or not you're an international student already and you are not sure on your F1 or M1 visa, how many hours a week you can work in an internship, or even if it's unpaid, if you don't know those visa stipulations, then you shouldn't really be applying just yet. You need to find out, what can I do and can I not do? Because some people have curly situations with their visa, and me as the employer, I want to know that you know your visa rights, because I don't have time to go and look up your visa rights. So I want you to come with all of your ducks in a row, and I want to know that you want to work for or do an internship at the company I work at in particular, and I want to know why. I want to know why the job. I always ask people, why this job? Even if it's an internship, why this company? Because if the answer is, well, I'm just looking for a job, then I know that your motivational fit and your tie to this company is not strong enough. There is no emotional reason to tell me why this job is a job that you're going to value if you get it. And valuing and appreciating a job leads to longevity. Most people will take on an intern in hope of developing them further and keeping them in the company because they've invested time into them. Even if they haven't invested a paycheck, they have invested money as in time. So it's really important that people realize that every employer is taking a risk, whether or not they're hiring you on a hourly rate, a salary, whatever, or not. They're still taking a risk in investing in you. And also, when you're going for a job, which is that entry-level job, you need to appreciate that you're up against more job applicants all the time, because there are more people who are skilled at that level. So more people can apply for that job and can meet the criteria. So that's when, as a recruiter, we start splitting hairs. Who's done their research? Who's writing a really good letter? Who's saying why this company, why this job? Who's showing me that they really care? So funnily enough, that can take 100 or 200 resumes down to 5 for me. We're just looking to see if you can follow instructions. And it's a really basic thing, but it is such a telling sign for us of things to come. So there's some things that I think are critical. If you want to get ahead of the pack and you want to be up there getting phone interviews and you're down to the pointy end of the process.
Right, and that really applies to any job, whether it's an internship, whatever it is. Yes, read the instructions, follow the instructions, and be specific, know who you're talking to. We say the same thing. So that is invaluable advice. Going off of that, which I think what you just said really spoke to a job applicant as well, as an internship applicant. But how would that apply maybe differently for someone looking for a job, an international applicant looking for a job in the US versus an internship? Or do you really see many differences between the two?
I don't. I look for the exact same things, but what I do look for is someone that has the ability to read and write English effectively. And sometimes, that can be, depending on the job, more of an issue than not. It really does change per job, because some jobs I don't need that skill to be that polished. Maybe it's internal comms only that they're doing in the job and there is leniency regarding written English. You should really be trying to research a US formatted resume and a US formatted letter And when I was applying for jobs years ago in the US from Australia, the first thing I did was go, okay, well, I need to find out exactly what the American market does with what they expect from applicants. I had to change my resume to a US format. I also found it extremely effective to not always reveal my location. And that's a bit of a funny one, because that comes down to your visa status and other things. So if you were already, if you were outside of the US and you were applying and you were going to be in the US, you had your ticket, you have your visa, you know your working rights, and you're going to be in the US in 3 weeks or something like that, and you are going to be ready to rock and able to work legally, and you know that you're going to be based in Los Angeles, don't put an international address and an international phone number, because that tells me, unless you write in your cover letter and use that as a communication tool, that tells me they're probably never coming to the US. They want to work from overseas. Well, that doesn't, hang on, how's that going to work for me? So sometimes there is definitely a smart way of playing it by sometimes not revealing that information if it's going to be held against you, but it's actually not something that is going to be an issue. So you're just going to maybe potentially worry an employer completely unnecessarily. So also when I'm coaching people on sometimes, coming over on an E3 visa, trying to obtain an E3 visa, which is for Australian nationals only, and that's a business visa, a business sponsored visa. If they're not going to be self-sponsored, which is more of a, normally a smaller portion of people come over self-sponsored on an E3, if they're looking for employment and an employer to sponsor them for that visa, I work with them to know exactly when to reveal to the employer where they are currently based if they're going to be interviewing from overseas, because there is great merit in you have to be honest and forthright and not withhold information. That's very important. Otherwise you risk looking like you don't have any integrity, and that is not going to go in your favor. But at the same time, if you mention it straight out of the gate, when you haven't built an emotional connection with the company, with the recruiter, with the process, because you've got through the process a little bit, then if you mention that too early on, you're very easy to discard. Once the recruiter is invested in you, you've had a phone interview, you've had a Zoom interview, a Skype interview, and they're like, oh, really, you get the vibe that they're liking you, you're getting through the process. You've got an emotional connection to that person to a degree, and that is a safe time to then say, by the way, I am based overseas. I would need sponsorship. I'm willing to pay for it myself. These are some things I'm willing to do to show you my commitment. If I was to be successful, I already have an attorney that can help if you don't have one, all of these kinds of things. But I wanted to let you know up front. It's still upfront enough, but to say it straight out of the gate may freak out a recruiter. So there are a lot of my clients who are extremely successful with getting a job and applying from overseas and getting the sponsorship when they're not even in the US, because they have known the right moment to tell the recruiter, I would actually need to be sponsored.
Excellent advice. And I know you mentioned the Australian national visa. What are the basic visas that you see that are required, to someone who's just delving into this process to work in the US or intern in the US?
Sure. So for Australians, it's an E3. For Canadians, their similar version of an E3 is called a TN. And that's also for people from Mexico as well. It's a TN visa. Then one of the most common ones is called an H1B. And the H1B visa is kind of the version of the TN or the E3 for anyone in other countries around the world. So that visa is a little bit different in that they have a lottery system every single year. And so whilst you need to be sponsored by a company and you can stay up to 3 years at a time, whereas those other visas are normally 2 years at a time, with the H1B, once you have your sponsor, so you have your company wanting to sponsor you, you have the level of skill required for the job that's been advertised, the company's willing to go all the way with you through that process, you get all of those ducks in a row, but then you go into a lottery. Then you have to be drawn out of the lottery. Then what happens is there's a certain amount of people all over the world every single year that are allocated these H1B visas. So every country, like with the green card lottery, has its allocation normally of people for the H-1B, or they may say, look, this year we're going to give out 65,000 H-1Bs around the world. So you need to then hope that you are drawn in those, say, 65,000 people. If you are, your visa goes on for further processing several months, within the next several months, and you can start normally as of October the same year. So you would apply around March. You would get some kind of response or update around April, May. If everything then gets further processed because you were selected, you would normally be able to start by 1st of October same year. If you are not selected, it doesn't matter that you have the sponsor and the company and all of that. You can't go on for further processing and get the visa. But it is the more common visa, especially for if international students are here and then they want to stay once they've finished their studies. What they normally get given is what's called an OPT, which is like a year of work experience. And during that OPT year, a lot of students will go, okay, well, let me try to get the work experience in a company that will then sponsor me to try and keep me. And then the company and I will go through the H-1B lottery process together and see if I get drawn. So that's probably one of the more common ways of coming here.
That's great. And I think also, I mean, clearly this is a process that if you are thinking about an internship in the US or a job in the US, you need to start very early on because of those deadlines and needing to be prepared to meet those deadlines.
Absolutely. That happens a lot where people are not forward thinking enough and they run out of time and then they call and say, I'm desperate to stay, I have to stay. And you're thinking, this needed to start a year ago.
In terms of the most common questions that you receive regarding these visas and the process of obtaining work in the US as an international applicant, what do you usually see coming up for people? What are the most common questions?
Wanting to know what kind of job they can do. What kind of level the job has to be, what kind of experience they need in terms of years of experience to be eligible for the different visas, because the different visas have different conditions, and so you need to meet that criteria. What happens more often than not is that people are on Facebook pages, Kiwis in LA, Aussies in LA, Canadians in LA, everything in LA you can think of, and someone posted a comment and so they've taken that as gospel. And it's so important that people do their research and take information from experts. So even with me and my clients, when questions come up that they absolutely need to get legal advice about from an immigration attorney, I will give them the guidance and go, this is an immigration attorney question. Let's go and back this up with the legal advice because you need to hear it from a legal professional who is a qualified attorney who has passed the bar. And so we go and check in all the time and make sure they hear certain things from attorneys. I do not ever sit here trying to be an attorney and professing to be an attorney. All of my clients know that we go, okay, at this point, let's go check in with this attorney or that attorney, or I help them research what attorney, if they come to me with their own suggestions. So I get a lot of questions about which attorney and which law firm. That is a huge one. Yeah, I would just say more often than not, it's really just people wanting to know, well, what do I need to do to be able to get this visa? And normally I prefer it that someone comes to me saying, this is what I do, and as opposed to, how can I create something to do to get a visa? It's normally, this is my skill, and then what visa would suit that, given that I want to keep working in this field. There are a lot of people that do approach me for an H-1B or a TN or even an O1 and or an E3, and they'll say, so I've got all of these years of experience in this particular area, but I want to come over and now be a rock star. And it's not how it works. There needs to be a through line there needs to be a hook to come to the United States or any country, and the hook may be that you met someone you're going to marry. The hook could be that you're a highly skilled professional and your skill set is needed in that country, and that's going to be a hook. It could be that you are an alien of extraordinary ability in the arts or sports or science and technology. That could be a hook. But you don't go, here's my hook, that got me in and now I'm going to change that and throw that out the door and go and do something different. You need to stay on that path. If you're using that to get in, then that's what you stay on. Unless you then get a green card, and then it's open slather. You've got permanent residency and you can go and apply for whatever job you want.
Touching on Alien of Extraordinary Ability, for those who don't know, and also for the creatives who we have on the site, we have actors, musicians, writers who look for, part-time work or a day job to support their creative pursuits, as I know you've done as well, since you're an actor as well. So how does that process differ? For example, if you're an Australian actor who's trying to come to the US, or an Australian musician, can you go over that just briefly?
Sure. So you really need to consider the fact that you can only work in the field that your visa stipulates. So it's important that you come over and don't expect that you're suddenly going to be applying for jobs in a different area to support yourself, because by law you cannot do that. So it's really important that people keep that in mind. There is, nothing necessarily to say that you can do an internship or not, because it's unpaid. So there's, a lot of situations where people maybe do a shift at an acting school in exchange for an acting class or something like that. The work exchange situations come up, but no money can change hands whatsoever. You cannot be employed. So people really need to come over with enough money. I know of people who have come over and they have actually been able to support themselves with a job that is in another country online. And they do get paid back in that other country. That is a very grey area that I always say you need to go in at the time and check with an attorney to see if you can do that, because, immigration is an ever shifting area. So you want to always make sure that you're getting the most up-to-date information from an attorney regarding that. But there seems to me a misconception, by some people, that it's like you being on an O1 is like you're on a green card. And so you're suddenly able to do anything that you like. But if you're an artist on a green card and you're trying to support yourself whilst pursuing your artistic career, then you really need to consider, a big thing is, what are the working hours that are required of that job? Because you really can't go, okay, well, I just need a job because I need to pay the bills. I'm going to go and take that job. And then you're like, oh, I can't do those shifts because now I can't do my auditions. Or because then what happens is you end up in this situation where you're not even doing what you wanted to be doing here. I believe it's about doing the right research and seeing what job conditions are out there that would suit you. It might be that you're doing only doing work at night, and that works for you, which is why a lot of people do hospitality work in this town. So it may be that you've pursued some work which is for nighttime only, and that's perfect for you. It may be that, you're doing something during the day, but your boss has said, look, as long as the work gets done every day, I don't really care how you get those hours in. If you get an audition, run off and do the audition. As long as the work gets done, I don't really care. And now with COVID, of course, so much of the work is online anyway. So it's really important to keep a broad mind about that, because you're asking someone to be flexible for you. So you need to be flexible for them. It's very give and take. And I'm a big believer in, it's not just take. I'm a big one for giving. And I find as a result, I meet a lot of people that give.
Certainly there's a transition here, and it isn't no work. It's just, well, how are we going to adapt to that? Because there has to be, some way to work during this time. So how do you see international job seekers having been impacted by COVID? Because certainly, and I know this is a multi-layered question, but in your experience, what have you encountered so far in terms of people getting jobs in the US? Or I know there's no one can even really travel in Australia. It's pretty much locked down, but for other countries as well, what are you seeing?
There is a lot of talk about, oh my goodness, well, I can't get an O1 visa, I shouldn't bother. When executive orders come out from the US government, it's really important to ask yourself, well, does it cover the visa that I'm interested in for work? Because a lot of executive orders come out and they have not typically, the last couple, necessarily touched on the O visa. But the instant reaction from people is, oh, well, I know that artists can't come to the US now. And I'm going, it doesn't even mention the O visa. It's got nothing to do with it. You can still apply for the O visa. And they're like, oh, really? And so again, it goes back to believing what you're reading online from a friend posting something. I have a Facebook page, Stateside Careers. I will post every single update from a range of different attorneys who I really trust and value their work. And so you can hear it in different people's voices. This is the interpretation of the executive order. This is the interpretation. So you can hear from multiple avenues. It does not affect this visa that you're concerned about. Don't worry about it. So I think it's important to just stay on what's current as well, because these things shift. Suddenly we're noticing quarantine in that country is not as long now. Oh, you can fly to that country. You can't fly to that country. Like, everything's shifting so fast. Whatever you do, don't trade on old information from a few weeks ago at the moment. Be like, as of today, what's the likelihood? What's the law saying? What's going on in that country? What's their quarantine period? And all of that, because I think right now we're seeing that those delays and expenses that production companies have to incur and studios, that seems to be the biggest issue at the moment, I'm noticing, with COVID. So you just kind of got to keep up with the times and keep in touch with what's going on in all these different industries and countries.
And for non-creatives, I mean, my thought too is you're starting the visa process, so far in advance that if you aren't like right in the middle of it, and like you said, things are changing daily, so it may not even be impacting you. You might have, by the time the visa came through and you moved here, this might be hopefully well behind us at that point.
Yes.
So basically it shouldn't really impact too much your plans at this point. Just stay focused on the career, the skills you have, the career you want to pursue, and the visa that you need to get. Unless you hear from a professional, someone like you, or a lawyer who knows that things have changed and they're not issuing those visas.
Yes, and there is another part of that, which is it depends what stage in their getting ready to pursue a visa they are in already. If someone needs coaching, which is something that I will do with people, and I have a lot of clients that I coach, it means that they're not ready to pursue that visa yet, but there are certain things they can do in their career right now from wherever they're living in the world, in their own job market, to help them to become closer to eligibility status, so that one day they can apply for that visa in the US. Now, for those people, it's like, okay, it's business as usual, go, go, go. If someone is visa ready and all they need to do is get that job in the US, say for an E3 visa or something like that, the thing is that you need to keep in mind that a lot of companies may go, we're just a bit scared to hire at all right now, let alone internationally. So you don't want to go ahead with the job application process necessarily internationally unless you know that, like your job board, they're advertising. It's really good, I would say, at the moment to really go via what job boards are posting, because they are legitimate jobs, as opposed to, I think if you're networking for the future, you need to be aware that those companies may not be in a position to give you any kind of answer until they get certainty surrounding COVID themselves.
And off of that, we hear a lot of misconceptions in terms of, job seekers just assuming the company's going to sponsor them and they don't have to do the work on their side. It's really something the company does. Can you speak to some of those? I know you touched on it earlier, some of those misconceptions that you come up against frequently.
Yes, there's a lot regarding, well, why should I pay for the visa? I'm like, I'm not saying you should pay for the visa if someone's going to sponsor you, but I'm just saying you've got a little bit of a hurdle against you, which is you do need to be sponsored. Wouldn't you want to, if you're really wanting to live in the US and that is your goal and doing this kind of job, don't you want to make the chances of you getting that job, as easy as possible? Don't you want to just really increase the chances of getting that job? So why don't you show your commitment to that potential employer by saying, you know what, and I would even offer to pay for the legal process in you sponsoring me. I would pay the legal fee. What you will find at a lot of big organizations is that there would be a process in place or a policy already whereby they would hear that and go, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. He or she would pay for their own, sponsorship process. When the job offer comes, they're going to go, by the way, we're going to cover it for you. So it just looks like a great thing to offer up. Even if they don't take you up on it, they're just going to go, committed, thank you, love that. So that's a big thing. The other thing is there are people that will say it's impossible. This is my favorite. It's impossible to get sponsored by an employer for an E3 or an H1B. That's because there's probably something that person was not doing that was as effective as what you're going to now do. Because if you do this in a really smart way, I will show you how to bypass all these other job applicants by doing things like, let's get your cover letter really clever. Let's get your resume in shape. Let's do all of these things that make you so damn appealing that you jump the hundreds of applicants and you are the preferred candidate. If you do your homework, if you do your research, if you ask the right questions of the right people, and if you don't know, just say, I don't know. Can someone help me to know who to ask, who's a specialist in this or that? If you figure it out and follow the process, you will get that visa, you will get that job, you will get whatever. You just have to stay the course. Also, I would say another big misconception is with the e-visa, is that people say you need a university degree. You do not need a university degree. There are different considerations to look at that an attorney will consider before deciding whether you're eligible. And one of them is, do you have a uni degree plus 3 to 4 years of relative experience? Or do you have no uni degree and 10 to 12 plus years of experience? So there's conditions for having a university qualification depending on what field of work you're in versus not having a uni qualification. Just ask an attorney about your specific situation. If there is a hook to get you to the US, that's really important, just dealing with the facts.
In terms of asking an attorney, and I know this varies depending on the visa, how extensive the process has to be, what is the general cost that someone is looking at when they are approaching? Can you even give a general idea of a number for that?
It absolutely is different for every single visa. It is completely different, and the variation is enormous between attorneys. I would say that if you're looking at an O1A or an O1B, you're looking at around anywhere between $5,500 and $7,000 plus statutory costs on top of that, which are a few $100s here and there. So there are people that will overcharge. So that's why I say to people, you need to speak to a number of attorneys to do your homework before hiring an attorney. And with an E3 visa, you're looking at around, anywhere between 3.5 and 5 in some instances. Green cards, there are 5 different kinds of green cards. They're all going to cost a different amount of money. If it's an extraordinary ability green card, it could be $7,000 to $12,000. People are paying $20,000. I think that's exorbitant. And then there are marriage green cards and things like that, which are a lot cheaper because they don't involve as much work by the attorney, and a different kind of work by the attorney. So there is a lot of variation. Some people just hire me for coaching on how to choose a law firm. And we just do a 1 hour, $150 US, and we jump on Zoom and we go through the things they have to ask their attorneys. And I say to them, my general rule is minimum of 5 attorneys that you will talk to, or law firms, for a free initial consultation. After we've spoken about what visas, I will tell the client, these are the visas that you are potentially eligible for based on my consultation with you. So when you go to these attorneys, I want you to ask about these visas and the process and the costs for these particular visas, and then also get them to evaluate your case to confirm what I've said, because you need to hear it from them. Talk to 5 different attorneys, because in life, until we see a pattern of behavior, it's very hard to know what's a good deal, what's a bad deal, what's in the middle. It's so important to just feel like I'm in great hands. I've got a great communicator. I haven't been ripped off. And that in itself will make the journey for you so much easier in general. So, but definitely you will see so much variation with the prices across the board. When people come to me, if they have already chosen an attorney, often I know a lot about how those law firms work, or I've maybe worked inside one of them in particular for a short time. So I can say, I know exactly how to navigate that law firm. So if you need me to guide you through trials and tribulations as they come up, I know how that person works. I know what works best for them. I will help you to navigate your own process through that law firm. If if people are finding that it's difficult to get the responses that they want from an attorney. And my big thing is kindness and compassion and professionalism. I will not encourage anyone to be rude, dishonest, entitled, anything like that. It's all about how are you treating others in life. It is all about compassion without being a doormat, and treating others with courtesy and respect.
The cost of sponsorship. So you mentioned if an intern or a job seeker says, "Hey, I can cover the cost of sponsorship." What amount what's a ballpark amount that they'd be looking at for cost of sponsorship?
Okay, so I should cover that and clarify and say that, first of all, it's not ever paying for actual sponsorship. It's the company paying for the visa. So if a company's going to say, "I'm going to sponsor you," they're essentially saying, our company, in most cases, they're saying, "We're going to pay for the visa." So the sponsorship part is with an E3 or an H1B, the employment offer is sponsorship in itself. And the process of hiring an attorney is what they're saying in most cases they're going to pay for. So that comes down to the same as the price of the visa. So if you're saying basically, and we could possibly edit the answer that I've given previously if it's going to confuse people if they don't listen to this part. If you're saying to a potential employer, "I will cover the cost of the visa," it's like you're the same thing as saying, "I'll cover the sponsorship," because it is the cost of the visa. However, this is where it gets really confusing with visas, and I understand why people get confused, because it's confusing. A sponsor for an O1A or an O1B is a different responsibility. It's different in its meaning to a sponsor for a corporate visa. So an E3, an L1, a TN, like all of these things, these visas, that kind of sponsor is the employer. For an O1, the sponsor or / petitioner is not procuring you any work. So they are not responsible for getting you any acting jobs. That's where your deal memos part of the process comes in. They're your offers of employment. They're your work contracts, deal memos. Sponsor is like Stateside Careers. I act as a business manager that sponsors artists. People never pay me for the sponsorship, but I do a whole lot of paperwork to give to their attorney, and I do it on their behalf. And I have a lot of back and forth with that client to get that all organized. I charge them an admin fee for my paperwork. So a sponsor in that regard is very different to the employer who is the sponsor.
But you can provide that service as well, a business manager, not just for the artist visa, obviously, but for the corporate visa too.
Not only if it's an O1A, which is a science and technology based O visa. The corporate visa, it means I would have to hire them myself. I would have to be the company. So that is, it cannot be me, because I'm not hiring anyone.
The corporate visa is the actual the sponsor is the company. If exactly, it is a corporate visa. Okay.
I was going to say it gets very confusing. Like, just as you're hearing it from me, that is how people hear it. They go, "Hang on, but what?" So you can do, and it's confusing. Yeah, that's why people go, "Sponsor what?" But doesn't it mean it means different things for different visas?
But just to clarify, your services are offered both to, not that you are the sponsor for anyone seeking a corporate visa, but you still offer consulting services to those seeking corporate visas and consulting services to those seeking artist visas.
Absolutely. And with the artist visas, I don't offer the sponsorship to everyone. I have a big belief in, I need to see that they have a genuine O1 visa case, an approvable case, and I need to see that they're working with an attorney. I don't care who the attorney is, as long as I can see that the attorney knows what they're doing. And the reason being is that I am never going to let someone pay me a $650 admin fee at the moment. I'm never going to let someone do that and procure my services as a business manager if I know for a fact that that visa will be denied.
If you were giving your best advice to someone looking to get a job or an internship in the US, what would that be? And also, what is the best starting point? I know we've touched on these things, but just specifically, what's the best starting point and what's the best advice that you could give?
The best starting point, I think, is the internet, LinkedIn, a job board, research. They see a job ad on EntertainmentCareers.Net, go and research the company, find out what the company does, read the job ad, read it 5 times, read it 10 times, write a list of all the things that you need to address in your job application process. Do your homework, make clear decisions about why you want that job. I think there is a lot to be said about seeing how you can build rapport with someone. If you can look up someone's LinkedIn and you can find out that's the person you're having a phone interview with, and you can find out what their hobbies are, you can find some entry point into building rapport with someone. You can be warm and open and friendly, or you can mirror someone in the way that you communicate and adapt to your audience. That builds such an instant likability and rapport that people then don't know why they like you. People at companies, hiring managers start to get very flexible when they really like someone. So I think it just goes back to trusting yourself and just being you and just bringing you to your job, and you'll find the right home.
So obviously that certainly applies to anyone, regardless of whether they're an international applicant or applying to a job 2 miles away.
Yep.
That's so important. But for international applicants, what can they do to make themselves stand out? And I know you've talked about research, which we promote too. Look up who you are applying for, look up the company. But are there any other like angles that can kind of give them an advantage for international students?
I think it just really goes back to adapting to the US market, adapting to the way things are done here and following that format immediately. And just, again, really just making sure that your language skills are on par with what's required for that job. Even if you need to go and get that checked by someone and you need to have someone read your resume or your cover letter out aloud, or you need to do it for yourself, just proofread. I think I see that is lacking from so many international applications and local ones. But internationally, I do see that it happens a bit more, because it does seem to be a bit more of a numbers game of people are panicking a little bit more. So I'll send this to everyone, and it's like, no, I really wanted you to tailor this. Those international students can't think that they're miles and miles away, so it doesn't matter. They need to act as if they're down the road. Pretend you're there and you're down the road. Address it, tailor it, make it specific. And that's really going to help. You're not applying to the United States. You're applying to this one company in this city, in this state. And I want to know that you're going to be local at some point, reminding us of your visa situation, when you're going to be local, whatever. Just really important. Listen, follow instructions, and just don't cut any corners. I think that's really important. Just don't cut corners, because if you're cutting those corners, you can bet someone else is not, and they're the one that's going to get the job.
In reality, how difficult or easy is a job or internship in the US to obtain?
It's extremely doable. If you have the right working rights and you do exactly what a job ad is telling you to do, and you're doing your homework and you're following instructions and all of that, it is so easy to beat the pack. It is so easy. It's the most basic things out there that people do that put them ahead of the game. If I can see that you care, that ties into motivation, it ties into appreciation, it ties into longevity. Companies, it all comes back to longevity. Companies don't want to spend time and money and have you just walk out the door because it's the wrong job, because you don't appreciate it, because you made a rush decision, because you weren't serious. You're going to put the time and effort into the application for the job that you really want.
Thank you so much, Elke. Thank you for answering all of our questions today. This is hugely eye-opening.
You're so welcome.
And if people do want to follow up in our community, what is the best way to reach you?
So if people want to reach out to me, I have my website, which is StatesideCareers.com. There is a button you can click for a consultation. I charge $150 US at the moment for a consultation initially, so we can go through all of your needs and find the path of least resistance, or paths of least resistance, so you know your genuine options. And that call goes from anywhere from 45 minutes to 75 minutes. Sometimes people only need that, and that's it. There's nothing else I can help them with except give them some guidance and send them on their way because they're ready to rock. Other people work through coaching plans with me, and I offer that information at the time based on what is tailored to their specific needs because everyone's different. So yeah, emailing me at info@statesidecareers.com is the other way as well.
We'll put that information as well up on the screen so that people can easily access that too.